All right, the recording has started, and this is the June 17th, 2021 Crossplane Community Meeting. We are on our way towards the V1.3 release of Crossplane, so we will jump into some of the patch releases we've been doing on previous releases, and then also the details about 1.3 coming up. So let's just talk real quick about the patch releases that came out. I think that was just yesterday. Dan, you ran these releases. Do you want to talk about the impact or change in these patches?
Yeah, for sure. This isn't affecting too many folks right now, but there was a bug in the RBAC manager, which I always am hesitant to say there's a bug in the RBAC manager because I feel like that just inherently sounds severe, but it really wasn't too big of a deal. In fact, it was giving less permission than we want. And so what was happening was when providers are installed before their controllers are started in a deployment, a service count is created and a role is bound to that service count, a cluster role. And when a provider is installed, it brings along a number of CRDs with them. The RBAC manager is responsible for creating the cluster role that has permissions on all of those types that are introduced by the CRDs. And then it also gives some access to some common data types, namely secrets, config maps, leases, and I'm missing one there. I believe there's 4 of them. But basically common data sources or common objects that a provider would need to interact with. And the reasoning for the config map and the leases or the lease object is for leader election, right? So if you're running multiple replicas, which you can enable by when you install a provider, you reference a controller config object that says, replicas 3 or sets the environment variable, which all Crossplane community maintain provider support of leader election true. It starts 3 replicas and it would put into leader election. Basically, one of them is running and reconciling the resources, but if it goes down, another can take over. In controller runtime, you can elect to choose between using config maps for leader election. You can kind of think about this as a lock, right? You take control of a resource and that signals that you're the leader. Or you can move to the newer leader election API or the coordination API, which offers a lease type. So essentially, the issue here is that the RBAC manager used the wrong group on the cluster role for the lease object. So if a provider was running with multiple replicas with leader election enabled and had opted into or was using a modern version of controller runtime that used the lease API by default, it would fail to start because it would say I'm unable to determine if I even can become the leader because I don't have access to leases. So essentially, this just corrected that pretty small bug that was impacting a few folks, and we wanted to get some patch releases out there. You'll notice that 1.0 is still an active branch until 1.3, which we'll talk about today. We did not make a patch release there because 1.0 does not currently give access to leases at all. When it was introduced, control runtime did not support leases, and we haven't added that because that's seen as a feature rather than a bug fix. So anyway, 1.0 will see end of life here in about a week and a half. And so we elected not to do a patch there.
Cool, Dan. Thanks for getting us updated on those patch releases that went out just yesterday and what the cause for the fix was there. Other news for releasing yesterday was for provider AWS. We did a 0.19 release for the AWS provider with a lot of new support for for services within AWS, most notably like Lambda and CloudFront are some of the services that are in there. I think they're all listed in, or most of them are listed in this the release notes right here. But so that's available now, and you can start taking a look at using Crossplane to provision and manage some of these additional services now as well too. I believe with this, oh yes, it's right here in the release notes. with this, this makes AWS a conformance cross-plane provider as well too, which we've been talking about in some of the previous meetings, but we'll go into an agenda item further down as well too. So a few releases going on in the past couple of days, and then we are working towards, as we said, the 1.3 release that is coming up in just over a week, I guess. No, sorry, a week and a half or so. So the release date is intended to be June 29th. We are in a feature freeze now. Or wait, does that start on Monday, the feature freeze, Dan, or is that already started? I'm sorry.
We are currently in feature freeze, although as a note, we have been somewhat flexible with feature freeze in the last couple of releases in terms of we've let some things in that have been in progress leading up to it, but Monday will be code freeze, so we will not let anything in after that.
Yep, good. I guess I got that right in the notes here. I got thrown off a second when I was trying to do the math on today's Thursday, it's the 17th, 29th is more than, so it's like Tuesday of the following week. But yeah, so next week would be the code freeze week, and we're currently in feature freeze. Yes, so let's talk about what's in that. I think that the community meeting is always an opportunity to talk about what we want to see in releases as we're wrapping up the current 1.3 release and getting it out the door and not doing any more features for it. It becomes more of a conversation of, hey, what's in 1.3? What what maybe be some edge cases or bugs or things that we want to continue to fix in 1.3. But then also the floor would always be open to what are bigger features and things of interest in the next milestone in 1.4 as well too. We do not yet have a 1.4 board, project planning board up yet, but we can kind of keep that discussion going here, and probably the next community meeting we'll have the early 1.4 initial planning and kind of design stuff going on early on there. So let's jump into the 1.3 board. Since Muaf is not able to make it today, so I'll go ahead and speak for him. Some big updates there. That there is so cross-resource references. There is a design doc that is out and open from Wafik that he opened a few days ago, maybe late last week. I'm not sure, but pretty recently. So I think this is pretty interesting because this is a high demand, high impact feature that kind of updates the shape of Crossplane's APIs to be able to, in a generic, common, consistent way, be able to refer from one resource, be able to point at fields or references on other resources. So you can start pulling things in, waiting for fields to get updated, et cetera, across multiple resources now, which is really nice for a eventually consistent, actively reconciling type of control plane approach. So I think the PR is linked within this issue here. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it is 2385. So that's a big effort went into this to kind of start shaping this API and get this design updated, which actually ends up fixing multiple issues. So the feature work behind this will not be in 1.3. Let's be clear about that. But the design work is here in 1.3 and ready for folks to comment on and kind of be able to share their opinion on what the API looks like, the ergonomics and usability around it, and what may be missing from it. Dan, did you want to get us updated on some of the big things in 1.3 that you had been working on?
Sure. So there are a couple things, and one of them I've added here, but before I cover that one, a fairly large one that I'm trying to see if I can find the issue for it. But it's basically around when we were using a patch that was from one resource to another in a composition. So if you have two objects in a composition, you couldn't patch from one to the other if you tried to patch back to the composite resource and then forward, if you will, to the other composed resource. So let me grab the issue here real quick because I think Ben created the issue and it is pretty descriptive. One moment here. All right. Yeah, required patch policy. So this is 2175. Let me drop it in here. And if you wouldn't mind pulling that up, Jared, Ben has a good example here of what it looks like when you're trying to do something like create an S3 bucket and then create an IAM role based on that that references the ARN of the S3 bucket. And the issue there is that we were all or nothing with composition. So what I mean by that is if you were unable to render all of the resources, right, a field was missing or a patch was missing, we wouldn't create any of the managed resources. In the PR that fixed this, which is, or changed this, I think might be more appropriate, is 2180. We instead say, if we can provision any of the resources, we will provision them. And so in this case, we'll go ahead and create that bucket, even though we can't create the IAM role that is missing a required patch. What that allows you to do is have objects that are dependent on each other, right? So in Ben's case, he had the bucket getting created, and then he had a from composed or to composite field patch that took a status field of the S3 bucket, patched it back to the composite, and then a from composite field patch on the IAM role that took that field that had been patched back and patched it forward to the IAM role. So lots of back and forth here, but essentially what this allows you to do is have resources that are dependent on each other and wait for one to come available before the other one gets provisioned. So that will be enabled here. And I know a lot of folks who are doing things like setting up EKS clusters with IRSA enabled, or doing something like Ben is doing here, creating permissions on something after it gets provisioned. This unblocks a lot of folks. So that's definitely a big one that will be in 1.3. The other one that I mentioned here is just looks like a Crossplane runtime update, but essentially the package parsing has been adjusted slightly. And why this is important is because it will be possible with the 1.3 CLI to produce a valid package, so produce an OCI image tarball, an X package file that is not valid with older versions of Crossplane. If you use the same source that you're using right now, that will not happen. So it would have to be a net new source where you're building with the new CLI and installing in an older version of Crossplane. So this is a fairly unlikely scenario. But essentially, there were valid YAML streams that we were not allowing. And so we adjusted the parsing a little bit so that we use YAML document terminators, which basically say this is the end of a document and it allows you to concatenate YAML streams. So this makes it possible for if you've ever worked with like QBuilder and seen that, it'll have a return and then a document separator at the top of CRDs generated. You'll see in our providers, we stripped those off because the package parser had issues with that. Things like that and little intricacies of YAML documents that would cause the parser to fail. Those are now, if they're valid YAML streams, will be accepted. So that's just kind of like a nice thing where you don't have to use as much machinery or make sure, to adhere to the finicky package manager. But it does allow for producing packages that are not backwards compatible.
Awesome. And then another big thing to mention for upcoming 1.3 is around the ability to patch from multiple sources as well too. That had been a longstanding PR that is now in and will be included in 1.3 as well too. I think it's highly requested feature. So the being able to take in a single patch to be able to take multiple values and then concatenate them or aggregate them into a single field is now totally possible. And there's documentation for it as well too that'll be part of the 1.3 release. So that is going out the door and will be in this release, and I think that'll make a lot of folks happy. And Hassan, I know you're on the call and you had written a composition that started using that functionality, so that will be part of 1.3 now that you will be happy to have that, I think.
Yeah, great.
Let's see, and then what else was in 1.3 of importance? Dan, were there other issues that you had worked on that you wanted to call out, or anybody else?
The other one that unblocks a few folks is the change, and I think this might have come up at the last community meeting, but it is in the done column, and it is old inactive revisions can create deleted resource before new active one. This was blocking some folks when they updated a provider to a new revision, and let's say there was a CRD that in the previous one was V1 Alpha 1, and then it drops V1 Alpha 1 support and introduces V1 Beta 1 support. So basically, there's no translation layer. An update of a CRD like that does not work. And so the solution would be we'll just go ahead and delete the CRD and let the new revision create it. However, because we have old inactive revisions still creating their CRDs if they don't exist, and just adding an owner reference on them rather than a controller reference, there could be a case where you delete the CRD so you could upgrade to the new revision, but the old revision would recreate the CRD with the old schema before the new one could replace it. So essentially this change just says if you are in inactive revision, if your CRDs still exist, you'll put your owner references on them and they'll stick around. But if they don't exist, you won't actually try to recreate them, which means that the only way that you could lose a CRD for an inactive revision would be you have to actually explicitly delete it. And so you're kind of opting into that, and you could always bring it back by rolling back to the previous revision. So that's kind of a small change, but there were some folks that had kind of a bad time updating some providers that dropped alpha support. You'll note that probably in the next release, we'll have some more machinery around handling alpha APIs, potentially even opting to mandate that users specify they want alpha CRDs installed because they can be dropped without notice between releases based on our versioning scheme.
That sounds good, Dan. Cool. So I think I think that to this group here, if folks already have ideas about things they want to see included in the next release for 1.4, that's great. We can talk about that, but probably something to start thinking about for big items or items of value for the community, high demand features. We will have a full 8-week cycle for 1.4 that starts at the end of June, beginning of July here. So if people want to start thinking about what are those high impact, high demand features that would benefit the community the most, then we can kind of take that into our next planning discussions in the next community meeting 2 weeks from now, and kind of put a plan together for what we want to be accomplishing. Does anybody have any items or comments that they want to add right now on milestones 1.3, 1.4, anything related to releases and upcoming stuff? All right. Okay. Okay, if not, then we can go ahead and move on to the community topics section. Dan, I did not get a chance to look up and see if there had been any recent live streams, podcasts, or anything like that recently. Do you want to comment on that real quick? Or we could just update the doc here.
There's none on my end. There might be a few community ones, just folks that I think I've seen on Twitter that I could drop in here.
Yeah, I think Mauricio had done one recently as well too. Yeah, like any of those. That's a good reminder too, because we see a lot of those on Twitter come up, and you can kind of collect those and add them here into the community meeting agenda so that we can be talking to them and getting some non-Twitter retweet related visibility for them as well too. Cool. Yeah, if you can update the doc there, we could do that async. So we can jump to the CNCF incubation. As of last time, we had the last end user interviews with the technical oversight committee scheduled. Those were completed, and the technical oversight committee should be discussing now going to open the public comment period for the incubation proposal. So all the links here are still here for the due diligence, the proposal itself, et cetera, the slide deck, all that stuff. If anybody wants to take a look at those, they're right there. And then a request to the community is that when the public comment period does open up, we will, put a message on Slack. We'll put it on Twitter, et cetera, all those communication channels to get folks to add their support for it there. I think a lot of folks have done that on the pull request itself here. But part of the process is, when you have a public comment period, is that gives another specific opportunity on the CNCF mailing lists for the Technical Oversight Committee to see some of that community support there. So that will definitely be something that comes up, and would love the community to jump in there and add some plus ones and some support for it there. So we'll send that out when that is open. I'm hoping for that pretty much any day. So be on the lookout for that. So conformance and certification, there's been a lot of great progress of getting that program off the ground. We've talked about that before, but now we've got more and more pull requests that are being opened that are the results of running the conformance suite for various providers. So we've got the provider, Marcus did a great job with the Equinix metal provider. There's a performance results for that. We've got IBM Cloud. Paulo, thank you so much for your help on that one as well too, and driving that and getting IBM Cloud results for being a certified performance provider up there. GCP is up there as well too, Provider Helm, and more coming as well too. There's a big push on AWS to, as I mentioned, the 0.19 release had some fixes and improvements to get AWS to be a certified provider. So those results, conformance results, should be landing in the PR here on the CNCF's conformance repo as well too. So a lot of great work and effort from all the providers to get their providers to a conformance state, and then running the suites and following up and getting all the results in. So thank you very much for all the efforts on that one to kind of put together this performance program and start showing some some demand for it and some value in it, and getting the governing board of the CNCF to vote for it with all that body of work there to show. So LFX mentorship, so that program has come to an end for the spring term for Rahul. Rahul did successfully graduate the LFX mentorship program. He made a lot of great contributions over the 12 weeks that he was part of the program there. And he did the final assessment, final evaluation, got all the pull requests merged in that we wanted to as well too. So all the planned work was included into the Crossplane repos, the Crossplane test repos, the provider no-op repos, et cetera. So it was across a number of different code bases. And it's all in, and Rahul successfully graduated. So I think, Rahul, you're on the call, and I just wanted to call out your work and your efforts there. It was definitely really appreciated, and it was great to see you grow and get more involved in the community throughout the spring term there. And it definitely shows the value of being able to connect to the community, grow the community, and get more people involved in open source stuff. So thank you very much for your efforts on that, Rahul. It was great to have you as part of the program. All right, and we will be in the future doing more programs like that, like Google Summer of Code or LFX mentorship for other terms as well too. We are not part of the summer term for LFX mentorship, but I would expect that we'll get back on it for the fall term, sometime in like the September timeframe after the summer is over here. Any other community related topics or news that folks want to bring up? All right. Then we can keep going on to the PRs section here. I think Muaf had one for the generic resource references, which we kind of touched on earlier. Dan, was there more context on that Muaf wanted you to give?
No, I just added that, and I think you did a good job of covering it at the beginning.
Okay, cool. So the link is in the agenda documents. for folks to go ahead and weigh in on how the API is looking and the design of this here. I think I read it through and it looks pretty solid to me, but it would definitely be great to have more eyes on it and kind of see what people are thinking about, how useful it is and if it solves problems for them. Okay, so there wasn't any other PRs or things that were written on the agenda doc or deeper technical discussions for this time. So anybody have other agenda items that were not in the doc? Okay. All right. If there aren't any other agenda items that folks want to bring up, then we could go ahead and go ahead and adjourn the meeting here. And we'll be on Slack and Twitter and all sorts of other ways to connect with us. And then I think, yes, so by the next time we meet, the 1.3 release will be out and we'll be discussing 1.4 plans to what we want to build and what we want to focus on there as a community. So hopefully folks can think about that and come to the community meeting in 2 weeks from now to start thinking about what we want to be accomplishing in the 1.4 timeframe. So thank you everybody for joining. Good to see everybody and take care.